Welcome back to the Deep Dive. And today we are doing something, well, completely different.
Yeah, this one it's not our usual fare.
No. Usually, we take a topic, maybe a business trend, a historical event, and we unpack it. But today, we're opening a case file.
We are.
And I have to be honest with you, after reading through the materials we have, the forensic audits, the legal breakdowns, the psychological profiles, I don't think I can ever look at this subject the same way again.
I agree. It's profoundly disturbing.
We are talking, of course, about the Wonka factory incident of 2005.
It is a disturbing file. And I think the reason it's so jarring is that for years, public perception has framed this strictly as, entertainment, a fantasy.
The children's story.
Right. But when you strip away the music and the color palette and you actually look at the evidence, the occupational hazards, the psychological profiling, the labor conditions, you aren't looking at a candy factory.
Yeah.
You are looking at a crime scene.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the vibe we're going for today. We aren't doing a film review. We're conducting a forensic audit.
A full legal breakdown.
We're treating the source material, specifically the events of 2005, as a legal dossier. Because when you lay it all out, the timeline, the injuries, the contracts, it's just horrifying.
It is. And to start, we have to address the elephant in the room, the perpetrator, Willy Wonka.
Right.
If you look at the psychological profile in our source material, the comparison isn't to, say, Walt Disney or some eccentric inventor. The core comparison here is to John Kramer.
Wait, John Kramer as in Jigsaw? From the Saw franchise.
Precisely. The profiles are nearly identical.
Okay, you have to break that down. That is a heavy comparison.
It is, but think about the methodology. Both men retreat from a society they view as ethically bankrupt.
Okay.
They both then construct these hermetically sealed environments, traps, essentially, that are designed to test the moral fiber of their victims.
I see it now. The factory isn't just a manufacturing plant. It's a gauntlet.
It's a panopticon of sweetness. Our source material actually refers to it as a murder castle. And Wonka targets specific vices, right? Gluttony for Augustus, greed for Veruca, pride and hubris for Violet.
Wrath, maybe sloth for Mike TV.
Exactly. He invites these subjects into a controlled environment where the architecture itself is designed to punish those very vices. The chocolate river is there for the glutton to fall into.
And the excuse is always the same, isn't it? I warned you. You broke the rules.
Classic deflection. It's a strategy used by psychopathic personalities to rationalize sadism as pedagogy. I'm teaching a lesson.
He's not teaching. He's torturing.
He claims the victims chose their fate through noncompliance. Don't drink from the river. Don't touch the squirrels. He sets a rule knowing full well they will break it, and then he washes his hands of the result. It's a total abdication of responsibility.
So we're establishing that this is a true crime scenario. We have a perpetrator, we have a location, and we have victims.
Well, multiple victims.
So let's dig into the profile of the man himself,
Yep.
the 2005 subject. And the sources are very, very specific about this. This is not the Gene Wilder version from the 70s.
No, a very different pace file.
The 2005 subject, the one portrayed by Johnny Depp, exhibits a completely different and, frankly, a much more dangerous pathology.
The clinical terms used in the dossier are schizotypal traits, comorbid with dissociative identity disorder.
So what does that mean in layman's terms?
It means he's not just quirky. The 1971 subject was narcissistic, arrogant, sure. But the 2005 subject is deeply traumatized and disconnected from reality.
And we know why, don't we? The Burton dossier, which is our primary evidence here, it goes deep into this daddy complex.
Right, the dentist father, Wilbur Wonka.
Man who criminalized candy.
Think about the primal scene there. He literally burned his son's Halloween chocolates in the fireplace while the child watched. That is foundational trauma.
It's psychological abuse.
Absolutely. And it arrested Wonka's emotional development. He built the factory not just to make candy, but as this sterile, controlled reaction to his father's authoritarianism.
A safe space for him.
But, and this is the tragic irony, he unknowingly adopted the role of the abuser. He became the cruel, arbitrary rule maker.
That's the part that gets me. He creates this wonderland, but he runs it like a prison. And his reaction to danger, it's just not normal.
It's what's called effect flattening.
Effect flattening.
Yeah. Watch the footage. When a child is in mortal peril, like when Augustus is being sucked up, that Pipe Wonka doesn't scream, he doesn't panic, he doesn't call for help.
He giggles.
He giggles, or he recites a scripted, pithy remark. It's completely dissociative. He's not in the moment emotionally.
It's chilling. There's that moment in the source material where they analyze his priority list.
Yeah.
A kid is literally choking, drowning in chocolate, being pulled into industrial machinery, and Wonka is worried about the chocolate.
That's the smoking gun for sociopathy, that complete lack of empathy.
The child is a contaminant.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To him, the chocolate is pure. The child is a foreign body. He places product value over human life every single time. He's not worried that Augustus will die. He's worried that Augustus will ruin the flavor profile of the batch.
Augustus-flavored chocolate-coated gloop. He says it himself.
And he's disgusted by the idea, not by the death, but by the potential for a bad product review.
Okay, so we have a profiled sociopath with deep-seated trauma. But a sociopath can be impulsive. What takes this case to the next level, and this is what really blew my mind in the notes, is the evidence of premeditation.
Yes.
We need to talk about the songs.
The musical numbers are the forensic smoking gun. There is no other way to describe them.
Explain that, because on the surface, they're just, quirky parts of the tour.
Let's look at this logically, as if we were presenting this in court. In a real-time, chaotic scenario, how does a workforce launch into a fully orchestrated, choreographed, multi-camera angle rock opera?
30 seconds after a child has been grievously maimed.
Precisely. It's logistically impossible.
I mean, think about a Broadway show. Or a concert.
Exactly. You need lighting design, you need complex blocking and staging, you need musical composition, lyric writing, and rehearsal. Hours and hours of rehearsal.
The Oompa Loompas didn't just huddle up and improvise a complex, rhyming song about Violet Beauregard's hubris in the 10 seconds after she turned into a blueberry.
Of course not. The existence of the songs is irrefutable proof that the events were not accidents.
So if the songs were ready,
then the outcome was predetermined. This proves premeditation with a capital P. It moves the charge from manslaughter to first-degree murder.
He knew. He knew what was going to happen to each child.
He profiled these kids. The golden ticket contest wasn't random. It was a global media event. He watched the news reports. He knew who was coming. He knew Augustus was a glutton. He knew Veruca was pathologically greedy. He knew Violet was obsessed with winning at all costs.
And the lyrics. This is another key piece of evidence. The source points out that the lyrics often use the past tense or a predictive future tense.
Augustus Gloop will not be harmed.
It's a pronouncement, not a guess.
It suggests the outcome was a foregone conclusion. He designed the tour route specifically to expose each child to the one temptation they were psychologically least likely to resist. It wasn't a tour.
It's a scripted elimination bracket.
A death bracket.
Yeah.
And there's that detail about the transport logistics, the attrition rate.
The boat.
Right. In the 1971 case file, it's very explicit. The boat, the Wonka KNEW, had only enough seats for the survivors expected at that stage of the tour.
So he knew he'd be losing a few people before they even got on the boat.
The 2005 dossier is a bit more visually obscure on that point, but the operational tempo is identical. He knew exactly how many people would be left at each stage. This wasn't a tour, it was a filtration process. A culling.
That is terrifying. It's not just negligence. It's a meticulously designed trap.
For children.
But if we're talking about crimes, about premeditation, we have to look at the workforce. The Oompa Loompas.
And this is where the charges escalate from, domestic crimes like child endangerment and murder to international human rights violations.
A whole other level.
We need to talk about the Colonial engine that powers this entire factory.
Wonka spins this story that he saved them, right? That's his whole narrative. He found them in Loompa Land.
It's the white savior myth. It is textbook colonial apologetics, and it's been used for centuries to justify exploitation.
He describes their home as a hostile environment infested with hornswogglers and snozwangers.
Which, first of all, sounds completely ridiculous and made up.
Of course.
But legally, it's a pretext. By characterizing their indigenous environment as uninhabitable and dangerous, he justifies displacing the entire population. He's framing himself as a rescuer.
When really he's a trafficker.
He moves them to a foreign environment, his factory, where they are totally 100% dependent on him for food, for shelter, for everything. This meets the UN protocol definition for trafficking in persons.
Let's break that down. What are the components?
Recruitment through fraud, harboring of persons, and coercion. The fraud is the promise of safety and chocolate. The coercion is the total institutional control he has over them once they arrive.
And then you look at how they're paid.
Cocoa beans.
Not a salary, not a wage, cocoa beans.
Which is completely illegal. It's a direct violation of the Truck Acts and modern U.S. labor laws regarding company scrip.
Company scrip. like in the old mining towns.
It's the exact same model.
Yeah.
He pays them in a currency that is non-fungible outside the factory. You can't take a sack of cocoa beans to a Ford dealership or a grocery store. Their wages have zero value in the outside world.
So they can never leave. They have no way to build a life outside.
They're in perpetual debt bondage. They live, eat, and sleep on site. It's a closed economic loop designed for permanent entrapment. It's identical to the coal towns of the 19th century where miners were paid in scrip that was only valid at the overpriced company store. They are prisoners.
And in the 2005 footage, the way they're portrayed, they all look exactly the same.
Visually, yes. They are digital multiplications of a single actor, the brilliant Deep Roy. But think about what that represents from Wonka's perspective.
Dehumanization.
On a massive scale. They aren't individuals to him. They aren't workers with names and families. They are a collective, interchangeable biological machine, a single entity that serves his will.
There's also the mention in the case file of the hair toffee incident.
Yes. This is where we move from trafficking to a clear violation of the Nuremberg Code.
The human experimentation charge.
Wonka casually admits it. He laughs about it. I tested this on an Oompa Loompa, and he grew a magnificent beard. He says it like he's discussing a lab trial on a petri dish.
He treats them like lab rats.
It's actually worse. These are phase I clinical trials for psychoactive and physiological agents, and he's conducting them without informed consent. He's exposing them to unknown, potentially lethal biological risks just to see what happens.
It's for gag product.
There is no ethics committee in that factory. There is no oversight. It's a sovereign state of terror operating outside all international laws.
Okay, so we've established he's a trafficker, a sociopath, a potential murderer. But let's talk about the facility itself, because even if you ignore the intentional traps, the place is just an OSHA nightmare.
It is a landscape of gross negligence. From a regulatory standpoint, Wonka has created what the law calls an attractive nuisance.
Break that down for us. What does that mean legally?
The doctrine of attractive nuisance is a really interesting part of tort law. It basically states that a property owner is liable if they create hazardous conditions that are likely to attract children who are unable to appreciate the risk.
And Wonka took this to the absolute extreme.
To a criminal degree. He literally tells these kids, everything in this room is edible. He actively dismantles their natural sense of caution. He tells them the grass is sugar, the trees are candy, the water is chocolate, and then
he puts them right next to a chopping machine.
Oh.
Or a giant fan.
Or an open-air, rapid-flowing industrial river. Left the focus on the chocolate room for a second. We're looking at a direct violation of 29 CFR 1910.23.
Which is?
The standard for guardrails. You have a rapid-flowing industrial fluid acting as a conveyance system, and there is absolutely nothing. Not a rail, not a rope, not a warning sign stopping a child from falling in.
A child he just encouraged to eat everything in sight.
It's textbook entrapment. And the chocolate itself. It's not water. You don't just splash around in it.
No, it's a non-Newtonian fluid. The file says it's like quicksand.
The viscosity would make swimming incredibly difficult, almost impossible. It would cling to you, weigh you down. And there are no life preservers, no rescue poles, no emergency shutoff valve.
Plus, from a public health perspective, it's a food product.
That's the FDA violation. It's a massive one. The river is completely open to the air. Dust, debris, anything can fall in. And then Augustus falls in, introducing a host of human pathogens, hair, skin cells, bacteria into the entire supply chain.
Any compliant facility would have to condemn the entire batch. Millions of dollars worth of product.
Immediately, you would shut down the line, drain the system, and sterilize everything. Wonka doesn't even pause. He just lets it run. That is a reckless disregard for public health on a global scale.
And then there's the boat ride. The Wonka KNEW.
A maritime disaster waiting to happen. You put children on a bizarre dragon-headed boat in a pitch-black tunnel. There's no emergency lighting. There are no marked egress points.
And the ride itself is insane.
High velocity, steep drops, random flashes of disturbing imagery, and absolutely no seatbelts or lap bars. Nothing.
It's gross negligence.
It goes beyond that. It's what's called depraved heart recklessness. He knows the extreme risks. He demonstrates a complete indifference to human life, and he proceeds anyway.
Okay, this brings us to the victims themselves, and I want to get forensic here. Because in the movie, it's all played for laughs. Oh, look, the kid is a blueberry. But the medical reality of what happened to these children is horrific.
It's torture, medically speaking.
Let's start with Augustus Gloop and the cannibalism theory.
Yeah. This one is hard to stomach.
So he gets sucked into the pipe.
Right. First, you have the immediate medical trauma. He would suffer from aspiration pneumonia from inhaling a dense fluid like chocolate into his lungs.
Drowning,
A
essentially.
particularly nasty form of it. Then you have crush syndrome from being forced through a pneumatic tube that is clearly narrower than his body mass. That would cause massive internal injuries. But the forensic analysis of Wonka's dialogue is what matters most here.
When they ask about the fudge room.
Exactly. One of the parents asks, will he be made into fudge? A normal person, a non-psychopath, would say, of course not. Don't be ridiculous. Our machinery doesn't do that.
But that's not what Wonka says.
No. He replies, no, the taste would be terrible.
He doesn't say, no, the machine can't do that.
Precisely. He implies the machinery is perfectly calibrated to accept and process biomass. He implies that he could process a human being into fudge, but the flavor profile is the only deterrent. It's a quality control issue, not a moral or mechanical one.
And the Oompa Loompas sing about boiling him.
We'll boil him for a minute more until we're absolutely sure. The lyrics corroborate a cooking process. The implication is that the factory has the capability to process organic bodies into confectionery products.
So they're potentially selling human-flavored chocolate. That's beyond dark.
It's industrialized murder for a consumer product.
Okay, moving on. Violet Beauregard. She chews the 3-course meal gum. She swells up.
The medical term for this would be systemic barotrauma. It's an extreme version of acute compartment syndrome. Her entire body fills with fluid, this juice.
What would that feel like?
Excruciating. The tension on the skin, the immense pressure on all of her internal organs, her heart, her lungs. It would be agonizing. Her body is essentially turning into a high-pressure container.
And the cure they propose is juicing.
Juicing implies mechanical compression. They are going to take a body that is already under extreme turgor pressure and squeeze it. The risk of skin rupture, internal hemorrhaging, the pain, it's just straight-up torture.
And she leaves the factory blue and flexible.
Which are not throwaway words. Flexible suggests the catastrophic loss of bone density or connective tissue integrity. Her skeleton might be permanently damaged. And blue suggests permanent cyanosis or a deep, indelible dye staining. She is permanently disfigured and disabled.
Then Veruca Salt.
The squirrels.
Zoonotic trauma. And we have to be clear, these aren't cute park squirrels. They are described as specially trained industrial workers.
Trained to shell nuts by tapping them, which means they have a high degree of intelligence and, likely, significant bite force. She is swarmed by hundreds of them. That is hundreds, maybe thousands of puncture wounds all over her body.
The risk of bleeding out.
Exsanguination, yes. But also septic shock from infections like tetanus or even tularemia, which is a real disease carried by squirrels.
And Wonka just stands there fumbling with his keys.
That's the depraved heart malice again. He deliberately delays the rescue. He watches her get mauled. And then she falls down a chute that leads directly to an incinerator.
He even says, oh, it's only fired up on Tuesdays.
Which is no comfort. Even if the incinerator is off, she lands in a garbage compactor filled with industrial waste. That's a lethal fall, followed by blunt force trauma and exposure to toxic materials. She's gone.
Finally, Mike TV.
Yeah.
The teleporter.
The file on this one calls it the medieval rack.
Because he gets shrunk, and then to fix him, to put him in the taffy puller.
Which is mechanically identical to the rack, a medieval torture device designed to stretch a person's body until their joints dislocate.
But they don't stop there. They stretch him until he is 10 feet tall and paper thin. What does that do to a human body?
It's catastrophic. His bones are stretched beyond their density limits, resulting in instant severe osteoporosis. He would be incredibly brittle. A slight fall could shatter his pelvis.
He wouldn't be able to support his own weight.
Not at all. And the cardiovascular strain? Imagine your heart trying to pump blood through a 10-foot, paper-thin frame. He's looking at a future of chronic orthostatic hypotension and guaranteed congestive heart failure.
So his life expectancy is
drastically reduced. He's a victim of grotesque medical malpractice. They haven't fixed him. They've handed him a death sentence.
These aren't funny accidents. These are life-altering, life-ending injuries. And yet, there's one winner at the end of all this. Charlie Bucket.
The winner, or as the psychological profile suggests, the final victim. The victim of grooming.
Let's talk about the waiver. Because that's the first thing they do. They sign a contract.
It's a legal nullity. It's void ab initio void from the beginning, for two main reasons. First of all, they are minors. A minor cannot legally sign a binding contract that waives their right to safety and due process.
Even if the parents signed it with them.
It doesn't matter. Parents cannot waive a child's fundamental right to sue for gross negligence or intentional harm. And on top of that, the contract itself was unconscionable. The fine print was miles long and indecipherable. You cannot enforce a contract that facilitates criminal acts. It's a worthless piece of paper designed for intimidation, not legality.
So Charlie, he didn't really win anything, did he?
No, no, he didn't. We need to completely reframe the idea of his victory. Charlie Bucket wasn't selected because he was the best or the goodest child.
Why was he selected that?
He was selected because he was the most pliable, the most easily influenceable. He was the most willing to accept the factory's twisted logic. Think about it. He watched 4 other children get maimed, disfigured, or possibly killed, and he didn't run. He didn't scream for the police. He just stayed.
He normalized the horror.
He did. He accepted it as part of the process, and that's exactly what Wonka was looking for. Wonka isn't looking for an heir to a chocolate empire. He's looking for an accomplice. He's looking for a successor to a system of terror.
He's grooming Charlie to become the next jailer of the Oompa Loompas.
The next warden of the prison.
So when they get in that glass elevator at the end and they blast through the roof?
He is leaving the world of law and order behind. He is entering the black site for good. He is accepting his role in the cycle of extraction, exploitation, and vigilantism. He is not being given a gift. He is being sentenced to become the next Willy Wonka.
That is an incredibly bleak assessment. But based on the evidence file, it's really the only one that fits all the facts.
It's the only logical conclusion.
So if we were to take this case file to a prosecutor today, what are we looking at? What are the charges?
The indictment table is long. You're starting with 18 U.S.C. Section 1589 for forced labor and trafficking in persons regarding the Oompa Loompas. That's a huge federal crime. Then you have multiple counts of aggravated child endangerment, product tampering for the contaminated river, aggravated battery for the gum in the taffy puller, false imprisonment, reckless endangerment for the boat ride.
And the human experimentation.
And of course, a clear violation of the Nuremberg Code for the non-consensual human experimentation. That's a crime against humanity.
It's a life sentence, multiple times over.
In a just world, that factory would be seized by the International Criminal Court immediately and declared a crime scene.
It really, really changes how you watch the movie. You know, we usually end with a simple takeaway, but this feels different. This feels like we've just uncovered something that was hiding in plain sight for decades.
That's the true danger of normalization, isn't it? We package these horrors in bright colors and catchy songs, and we just accept them without question. We laugh at them.
So here's the final thought I want to leave you with today. The next time you watch that movie, or maybe when you show it to your kids, ask yourself this. Are you watching a fantasy? Or are you witnessing evidence of a crime that we as a culture have collectively decided to ignore?
And a follow-up question, are we the audience just as complicit as the bystanders in that factory for watching it happen and doing nothing?
The evidence speaks for itself.
It certainly does.
Case closed. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.